Today, my guest is Joe Mitchell, founder of Run GenZ. It's an organization that recruits and trains Gen Zers to run for office. Hold on to your seats. We're going to have a lot of fun. Welcome to Culture Shift, the Barry Farah Show. We are living in an American culture that has shifted from tolerant to cancel culture, from decent to rude, from optimistic to cynical, and from relatively safe to increasingly violent. But it's not too late. I hope to equip you with a historical framework applied to current events so you can lead and get America back on track for good. Hey, welcome back to the Barry Farah Show, Culture Shift. And Joe, welcome to the show as well. It's just great to have you on the show. This is Joe Mitchell from Run GenZ. He's the founder of this organization, and he's quite something. He's already run for office and won. So I understand that at 21, you were the youngest member ever elected to Iowa House of Representatives. And in that capacity,
yes, sir.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
That's awesome. And in that capacity, I think if I get it right, you served as the vice chairman of the Ways and Means Committee and on the Judiciary, Commerce, State Government Administrative Rules, and Education Sub-Appropriation Committees. I mean, that's a mouthful for a 21-year-old. So tell me a little bit about that. And then after that, I'm going to ask you a question about your childhood, which isn't that far away from now, though you may feel like it's a million years ago. So what motivated you to run for office and how'd you win?
Sure. Well, Barry, thanks for having me on the show today. I really appreciate it and looking forward to the opportunity to have some conversations about our future, right? About my future and about my generation's future and where this needs to go and what I'm trying to do to help that out, right? And so, I'm a guy from Southeast Iowa, born and raised, 24, currently got elected to the Iowa House at the age of 21. And so, I ran when I was a junior in college, right? So I was a junior in college when I decided to run for the seat. So, I was still in my undergrad and, I decided to throw my hat in the ring. And I decided to throw my hat in the ring for a few reasons. So, I'll step back a little bit and kind of tell you that, obviously, growing up in a very conservative household, very faith-based household, those shaped my views on a lot of things, right?
Sure.
My parents were small business owners. They had a small manufacturing plant that they started from nothing here about 20 years ago, when I was still a child. And I got to see my dad grow this business throughout my life. But what I saw was, the government continually getting involved and putting regulations and more taxes on his business.
Right.
And my folks, who are very philanthropic people, who give away 50% of their profits to charities around the world to spread the gospel and to help with education efforts and healthcare efforts and orphanages and all
they sound like great people.
They are, and so but those things shaped my worldview, right? Mm-hmm. And it shaped it to show me that people can do better things with their money, and people can help out more people than the government can. I remember what a story my dad told me when I was younger was they'd given, I think it was, $60,000 to build 3, clubfoot clinics down in El Salvador. And our business deals with building clubfoot braces, but they gave $60,000 to build clubfoot clinics down there. They were able to build 3 clubfoot clinics, fully staff the clinics, and help out thousands of young parents that had babies that had clubfoot, right? Wow. And so he used that as an example, though, that's what he could do with his own money to help out people around the world. And if you give that to the government, they're going to squander it, right? They don't know how to take care of your money. They don't know how to be efficient with their money because they don't care, right? And it's no fault of their own. That's just how the system works. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so those types of things formed my worldview. And the other thing was too, is when I was growing up, my parents didn't watch the newest sitcom on ABC. They watched Fox News, right? So I grew up on Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly. And, obviously those things impacted how I've seen things, throughout our country and throughout the world and see the problems that we're going to be facing. So
hey, let me just ask you a more personal, let me interrupt real quick and ask you a more personal question, because I'm sure some of our viewers are just curious about this. Okay. So how many points did you win by? I mean, how close was the race?
So in my primary, I won by 100 votes.
Okay. And then in the general, it was a conservative district, so you won by a wider margin?
20 points. It was
Okay.
3,000 or 4,000 votes.
Yeah, that's great. But
on that
100
wavelength.
votes in the primary. And and your education had something to do with it. Your parents, of course, had a lot to do with it. And what you were interested in, became intrigued with, had a lot to do with it. So what's the minimum age for an elected office in Iowa for the state legislature?
21.
Okay, so you did it at the minimum. That's awesome. And are most states 21? Is that how that works, or do they vary?
It just depends. It's state by state. And so, like for instance, West Virginia, and we have a member of my organization that's in Run GenZ. He got elected at 18 to the West Virginia House of Delegates. Wow. And so it is that's state great. By state. Some states is 25, some states is 21, some states is 18. But it just depends. But for the most part, you can run at a young age, for the state legislature, and definitely for, more local races as well.
So now you ran, you served, already retired from politics, and started this organization. So I guess you served one term?
Well, I'm still serving.
Oh, you're still on. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm in my second term in the Iowa House.
So you can do both. It's not like a conflict of interest or anything. You can help others get elected, run this, and run and still be in the legislature. So is the legislature in Iowa a full-time one, or is it a part-time one like some states?
No, it's a citizen legislature, and most states do have citizen legislatures, right?
Yeah. That's good. That's why the Constitution was set up, to give that so much power, because you are so close to the people.
And that's why you see your state legislatures normally ran a lot more efficient than the federal government, because we're back home in our districts, nearly every week, talking to our neighbors, talking to folks down here, and holding a job as well, and knowing what it's like to have the government take out of your private sector paycheck, right?
So this is exciting to me, because you're really hitting on a lot of cylinders that I think are important. So let me ask you this: to take the mystery out of it, I'm just thinking of a 22 to 29-year-old that's watching you right now. Take the mystery out of it. How hard is it to actually run for office at this level, at the state level?
Yeah, well, Barry, that's exactly why I started my organization, right? Because I saw myself do it at 21. I saw many other young conservatives that have now been co-founders of my board run at a young age as well. And the whole thing came down to, we were willing to put in the work. We had the time and energy in our hands to put in the work, to knock on doors, to listen to voters, and to be able to do that. And that's why in my primary, I had a 4-way primary. The party was backing somebody. My predecessor was backing that same person. It was supposed to be a shoe in that door for that person that was running. But they didn't knock a single door. They didn't knock a single door. They didn't make a single phone call. They thought their name recognition, their signs around the district would get them to be the nominee. And that ultimately didn't happen, because I went around and knocked thousands of doors, made hundreds of phone calls to folks across the district, and listened to them. You know what I mean? And that's what you just worked.
You also just worked harder, and you got a handsome young face, and you knocked on the door and said, "Look, I want to serve you." And that's compelling.
Yeah, exactly.
That's compelling. So what I'm trying to do is just take the mystery and the difficulty out of it from the standpoint of somebody who's thinking about it. And that's really what your organization does. Let me ask you a quick question about your organization here. So on your website, it says you're going to get control of the future by supporting the vision of the founders of this country. I'm going to break this down. I'm going to ask you I know what follows that, and there's a completion of that sentence, but I just want to break this down to make it simple. So you want to support the vision of the founders of this country. What does that mean?
So to me, Barry, what that means is that, our founders created the ultimate document ever created, right? So far on the face of this earth. And that document was founded on liberty and freedom, ultimately meaning that you can decide what is best for you and your family versus the government, right? And that we have these inalienable rights given to us by God, and those things include life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That's what they wrote in the Declaration of Independence. And then going into the Bill of Rights, we're talking about we had the right of free speech and to bear arms, and to be able to, not be warranted to, unreasonable, searches and seizures or warrants, right? And so, but these are things that other countries in the world don't have, right? And
we're really unique I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's exciting to me. We really are unique as a country that instead of just being founded on a geography or a conquest, we really were founded on an idea. And you say it at the rest of this intro to your website. You support conservative political values such as limited government, which was clearly the concept of the Constitution, free market capitalism, individual responsibility, and fiscal restraint. Those are your pillars, right? Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly correct. And the thing is what we're trying to do is, I understand that my generation is alarmingly going way more far left than any other younger generation. We know that historically younger generations are more liberal, but it's to a point where it's alarming now, right? It's to socialism, it's to communism, and these things are being communicated to them on these college campuses, in high schools, and so these kids are being indoctrinated, right? And so what I truly believe is we have to have young, brave conservatives that are running for office and communicate to our generation that those ideas have destroyed all kinds of countries around the world, that have killed hundreds of thousands of people around the world. And the only way that we're able to communicate to those young people is actually have young conservatives actually be able to do that and be able to explain to these people that America is the greatest country on earth, right? Like, hands down, there's no doubt about it. And that is continually not being told to our young people. We're being told that we're this terrible, racist, bigotry country, which is just not true. And so that's what I believe. We have to have young conservatives like myself and my co-founders and the other members that belong to my organization to be able to communicate to our generation that, the ideas that we had to believe in, the ideas that founded this country, and that was on life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
So you're still functioning as a state legislator, and you are running Run GenZ, and you're helping primarily Gen Zers have the courage to jump into politics at a young age, not wait. So what is it that Gen Z actually does to help them? Do you help them figure out how to raise money? Do you help them think through what it takes to run? What's the role of Run GenZ?
So all the above, but in a nutshell, Barry, what we do is we help empower, recruit, and mentor the next generation of conservatives. And how exactly we do that is we go around to conferences like Turning Point conferences.
That's a good
Young
place.
Republican chat. Yeah. Turning Point's great. Charlie's a good friend of mine. So
Charlie's awesome.
And he's a big reason why I started this. I actually came to Charlie about a year and a half ago and said, hey, we need to start an organization like this. And he told me, Joe, you go start this. We'll partner with you. And that's exactly what we've done. But
that's great.
Going to Turning Point conferences, young Republican conferences, college Republican chapters, and talking to groups that already have done a phenomenal job on the grassroots of things, on getting these young conservatives, involved and excited about conservative politics, and then going to them, sharing our story as elected officials and saying, hey, if I can do it, you guys can do it. There's nothing special about me. I'm not a 4.0 student. I just went out there and knocked a crap ton of doors and put the hard work in and listened to the voters and had these conservative beliefs.
That's good.
And so that's what we're doing. But then after that, we're able to hook these conservative, potential conservative candidates up with mentors. So if you're running for city council, right, we're able to pair you up with somebody that's already an elected official that's a city council person, right? If you're running for the state legislature, we're able to hook you up with somebody like myself that's already a state legislator to be able to help you with that process. And, how do you door knock? What should your messaging be? How do you fundraise? And kind of these basic 101s of campaigning that I had no idea what the heck to do when I was starting out. And a lot of my colleagues that are in this organization with me didn't either. So we're looking at this like, we're doing everything in the back end to help you with the information you need to run a successful, good campaign. And a lot of these, local races, you don't need money, right? All you need is, $1,000 for some yard signs and some palm cards to hand out, but you need to know how to do it. You need to know what your message needs to be for that. And so that's ultimately what we started. We've started this Big Brothers, Big Sisters.
It's really good.
For conservative politics.
This is excellent. When I was your age, the idea was, you would want to shoot for the fence. You want to go straight for a federal office, governor, and then, a quick process up to trying to be a senator or a president. And the idea of that was that most people were not involved in local politics. They didn't really understand that much about it. And as a consequence, they didn't really think that it was all that critical, and they sort of ignored it. On the positive side for you, where you're going, it's realistic, but you're also using a strategy that we haven't used before, which is being humble enough to accept that you need to go after where you can have influence right now. And at a young age, this is fantastic that you're encouraging a realistic but really smart approach. And then, of course, who knows? I would imagine that as soon as you turn 25, you're going to be thinking about another level on your end, which is great, but you've already had, 3 to 4 years of experience before you start shooting for maybe a federal post. But these state legislature posts and these commissioner posts and these county posts, it's just a great approach to take on. I applaud you for it. Okay, so there's pros and cons to a young person jumping in and taking on a representation post. How can you represent me if you haven't been beat up that much by life? And that is, a potential pro as well, because you haven't been beat up that much by life. You can take a risk, and you can not have to think about your retirement and all of that, because you're in your 20s, for goodness sake, and you can go and you can really give it your all and be a little more gutsy and courageous without having so much to lose. And in a lot of cases, you guys are single, so you're not even really thinking about the responsibilities of a family quite yet. So that's the positive. On the negative, and I'm curious to how you respond to this. You don't have certain experiences that would be useful. You haven't started a business and failed or almost failed and seen how that feels. You don't have that deep learning experience that comes from life. So what do you, young adults, bring to public office that you think is needed in America right now?
Sure. And I appreciate this question, because the number one question I got asked at the doors when I first ran was, are you old enough to run? Right.
Exactly. Sure.
And so,
is it legal? Are you legal? So.
Yeah. And you had to, have some humility. Right. And, but I just said, just barely. Right. And I wasn't just barely old enough at the time, but I said, I truly care about the community. Here are the points I'm running on, right? To have a fiscal responsible budget, to cut taxes for small businesses, to take care of our rural public education. And so, when I had a plan ready, they said, well, that's impressive. You came to my door. Great. That's impressive. And they said, you know what, Joe? They said, my generation has completely screwed everything up. So we'll give you a shot. That's what the response was most of the time. And so I think that's what most people think. But the other thing, you got to look at things in historical context. James Madison was 25 when he signed the Constitution, right? And so,
John Adams was 13. John Adams Jr., John Quincy Adams was 13 when he went over and was the diplomat on behalf of America.
Yeah. So people got to put this stuff in historical context, that young people were influential in building this country. And most of them were young compared to Benjamin Franklin, right? He was like the one old guy. But most people were under 40, right? And so we got to remember that when we have young patriots like myself and others that want to make a difference and want to be trailblazers, right? And really care about our country, because ultimately we have the most to lose, right? God willing, I have another 60 years on this earth or more, right? And I hope and pray that we can save this country and put it back on the right track, or else.
Actually, I think that is your most compelling argument right there. If I were in your shoes, I think what would really convince people in my age group is what you're saying right there. Look, at 18, you can send us to war to die for you. I'm 21, and I'm willing to go to battle for you. And the reason I'm willing to do that is I want a family. I want kids, and I want grandkids, and I want to be able to enjoy freedom in this country. And so I'm willing to have the guts to go forward with courage in a way that is different than folks that have more to lose, that are in the middle in their thinking more toward retirement or semi-retirement than they are toward building something for the long term. I have an alternative, which is to do nothing and watch my country just completely disappear and lose the great freedoms. And so I'm willing to I'm not going to war physically with a gun in my hand. I'm going to war for you in a civic way to help keep this a free country. I think that. Sorry to take your thunder, but I think that's
no.
I think that is a great argument for you. That'd be very compelling.
No, that's a perfect point, and we do need to start saying that more. But the other thing is too is that those arguments are mostly going to be in the primary, right? When you're in the general, you're fighting against ideas.
Sure.
You really just say, this is what my opponent believes, right? They believe that there should be more government control, that should be more taxes, and that there should be more indoctrination. And this is what we believe. We believe that there should be more, choice for families, and that, there should be more, freedom and liberty type of legislation that we're proposing. And it's a battle of ideas and what we're dealing with, right? And we've known that from candidates that we've had, recently, that we're battling against policies, not personalities.
No, that's great. But let me ask you this: how do you vet and train your potential candidates? How do you know that they're going to be freedom oriented? They're young. Do they know what they're talking about? And do you feel like they've got it deep enough in their soul that they'll hold to those freedom principles?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So how our process works is, if you're a young person, we've met you, at a conference or at some sort of event, we say, hey, apply online to our website. They had to go online and fill out almost like a job application. Good. And so then what we do is we have a vetting process and an interview process, and it's very complex as well, right? We have several interviews they go through, but that's not only to vet them to make sure that they're standing for capitalism and free enterprise and free markets and those sorts of things, but just to see what their interests are as well, right? Sure. What would they fit well in? But also we do district research for these candidates, right? So we look, is there a good conservative in your state representative district? If there is, we don't want to primary them, right?
Right.
We're going to look at the city council race, the school board races, and see what is open. What do we need you for? Because we waste so much talent. We waste so much talent on people fighting within the movement.
Right.
And so we're trying to steer away from that. And so that's why we do district research. We figure out the best recommendation for you at this time, give you that recommendation, and then that's when we work with you. Excellent. But the other thing is, there's kids that are 16, right? They're applying to our website. And so, we do is say, hey, join a city board, right? Join your Parks and Rec board and just get involved somehow. So we're encouraging every person that applies to our website to get involved somehow or another, right? And we're pointing them to the right direction. But that's the beauty of our organization. We're actually able to vet them, interview them, see what their capabilities are right now as a young person, and then point them towards the right direction.
That's fantastic. So give me maybe a sprinkling of some of the offices that people are running for now, or that you've got lined up fairly shortly in the queue.
Yeah, well, we got people running for state legislatures, right? Like myself. Yeah. We got people running for city councils, school board. We just had a guy a few weeks ago win a library trustee out in Idaho, in his hometown, right?
Good.
And so he was fed up with the library trustee they had.
Good deal.
Decided to run for that, and is in our program. So anything on the state and local level, we're involved in.
That's
and
great.
So we're helping anybody under 30. So we're using Generation Z as a broad term right now, but anybody under 30 that's a freedom-loving conservative, we're helping out to be able to get into office and find the office that is the best fit for them right now. And so, we've had over 130 different young people that have applied to our website that are interested in running for office, and we're having more by the day. And
what would be your guess of how many that you'll be helping or have some relationship with that will be running for office between now and the 2022 election for Congress?
I mean, I think we're going to have probably a couple hundred at least.
That's great.
That goal keeps expanding though, Barry. The goal keeps expanding. I started out, 8 months ago when I first kind of started getting this thing off the ground. And I said, if we got 50, solid candidates by 2022, and we have, 75% win rate, that would be a win, right? And then we started going to these turning point conferences. We went to CPAC. We're having our own annual conference here in July, but we started going to these events, and there was so much more interest than I thought even, right? And so many more, young conservatives that were fired up. And then when they heard my story and they heard my testimony and they heard my co-founder stories and testimonies, it makes a huge impact, right? Because they can relate. They can relate to our backgrounds and our stories and how we're able to.
So real quick, what's the
successful.
co-founders, the two other, what's their story?
So we have two gals from Florida, an African-American guy from West Virginia, and a guy from New Hampshire. So the two gals from Florida, Josie Tomcow, Amber Mariano. Amber is the youngest elected official ever to get elected to a state office in Florida. She got elected at 21 as well.
Good for her.
Josie got elected at 23, I believe. So
wonderful.
Obviously another extremely young woman in the Florida legislature. Caleb Hanna, who's from West Virginia. Caleb actually ran at 17, got elected at 18, became the youngest elected African American ever in the history of the United States.
Way to go, Caleb! It's fantastic.
Yeah. So Caleb's a rock star, and then Joe Alexander up in New Hampshire, a good friend of mine who I actually met at a conference about a year and a half ago, got elected also at 23. He's 26 now. So just another young, vibrant conservative. But all these people that helped me start this organization just have fantastic stories and are incredible people. And I couldn't do it without them either.
No, that's fantastic. So if we go to the website, it's rungenz.com, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have, most of our podcasts are more of a monologue, and I'll talk about why HR 1's a bad idea, why HR 5's a bad idea. I'll sprinkle in there some Federalist Papers concepts, and then at the end, it's kind of like, okay, well, Barry, that's great. You scared the heck out of us, and we agree with you that that's really bad, but what can I do about it? And then my appeal is, hey, run for office. So now we've got a place to point them. You can get a lot of support by going to rungenz.com, and you got people like Caleb and Joe that'll help you navigate that process. It's pretty fantastic. So what would you say, as we get close to closing out here, what would you say is the number one, number two, and number three ingredient that it takes in your own soul to have to be successful running for office? What does that take? What do you have to be like?
Well, you had to be convicted by your beliefs and be a hard worker. Those are the two things, right? You got to have core principles that you believe in. You got to have stories that you can tell on why you believe in those in particular principles. But then you just got to have hard work, right? You got to be able to go out there and knock the doors and listen to people. That's what people want, right? When you knock on their doors, they want to hear that you have a plan, but they want to hear that you can listen to their concerns and what they're going through at that time, right? And so those are the two things that you need, especially in local and state elections, and you'll be successful. And if you do those and hold those things dear to your heart, you'll be able to make a huge impact.
Joe, it has been absolutely a joy to talk with you today. I mean, I just love what you're doing, and I think everyone in my age group looks at you as hope, and it's encouraging. So we need the two ingredients, fellow Gen Zers. Just have to be a hard worker and have a deep belief in freedom principles. Love, the concept of limited government, freedom economics, being responsible for your own activities, individual responsibility, being comfortable with fiscal restraint, and loving the founders' documents. With those two ingredients, having that in your soul and being a hard worker, you can succeed. Would you agree with that, Joe? Is that what we're looking at?
Yes, 100%, Barry. And I really appreciate our conversations today, and it's been a joy to be on here. Okay.
That's fantastic. Well, we need to train and mentor the next generation of freedom lovers in this country, and you're the ticket. You're an excellent conduit to making that happen. So, thank you for being a part of that. Again, just check out rungenz.com. If you're a freedom-loving, hard-working Gen Zer, go ahead and run for office, and they'll help you navigate that and make it through your home state, and you might be in elected office inside of a year. What a fun idea. God bless you, and until next time, we're all about your success, and your success depends on your freedom. Thanks, Joe, for being part of the show.
Thanks, Barry.
All right. God bless you.
Hi, I'm David Farah. Thank you for listening to my dad's podcast, The Barry Farah Show, Culture Shift. Click subscribe now to be sure you don't miss an episode. Share this podcast with your friends on social media and give The Barry Farah Show your 5-star rating. Check out today's show notes below this episode and at thebarryfarahshow.com. This podcast is also available in video format at The Barry Farah Show on YouTube. See you next time.